All right, people, we're back. Gonna run down the UFC 110 Postfight. It was a good night, man. Good night of fights. Good night. I'm gonna start out with the Stefan Maier versus Christophe Straczynski. It was a good fight. I mean, Christophe pretty much, was the better fighter of the two, obviously, but it was a good fight. Stefan Maier looking to the point, just like I thought. Stefan Maier, getting to the point where he's gonna have to get caught here soon. He lost to Mark Coleman, like I said in my pre-fight. He lost to Mark Coleman, but he's still here. It just doesn't make sense to me. I really don't get it. It's not a fight that I'm gonna get all hyped up about or go on and on about. So I'm gonna move on to Krokop versus Anthony Parash. Anthony jumped into this fight on a week's notice. And he did fairly good. I'm not gonna say he did great because he's against Krokop. Krokop, I think these days is a little bit questionable. We kind of don't know where he's going at this point. We've seen him get his ass whooped quite a bit this last few outings, so he did good. He was aggressive at points. Parash, like I said, on a week's notice, he did all right. You know what I mean? He didn't do great, but he did all right. But little update, he got for taking on Krokop at such short notice and stuff. He got awarded a 4-fight deal with UFC. 4-fight deal. Krokop, like I said, was looking aggressive at certain points, but I think it was just because Krokop's against the fence at this point in his career in the UFC. So he has to do what he has to do, especially with a guy. Parash is 10-6 right now. Not a horrible record, not great. It was an alright fight. It wasn't too bad. Parash, I think, was obviously a little outskilled. He keeps saying that his training's changed up. He's doing different things with his training. He's been saying after the last 3 fights. And his last 3 fights, win or lose, haven't been that great. But anyhow, I'm going to move on to Ryan Bader versus Keith Jardine. I actually thought that was a pretty good fight, if you're Ryan Bader anyway. Jardine doesn't change his game up. He does have a very, unorthodox style, which can throw fighters off, but Bader was able to, figure it out, and start picking them off, scored the knockout, which is, like I said, man, no amazing feat, It's great for Ryan Bader because he's new in the UFC. Knocking out Keith Jardine is no amazing feat, but yet again, I don't want to take credit away from Ryan Bader. Ryan Bader went in there and did the job. The guy's looking promising, man. He's at the 205 weight class. If he gets in, gets the right training. I don't know who he's training with, man. I don't know who his trainers are. Anyway, a great win for Ryan Bader. Knocked him out. I still think Keith Jardine should be cut. Sounds shitty, but, I really honestly think that Keith Jardine has kind of gotten himself kind of like the gatekeeper name for light heavyweight division. So it seems like everybody that starts getting into decent ranks has gone through Keith Jardine. It's starting to look that way. I wanted to tell you guys too. A couple of you guys mentioned something about I'm kind of slipping on my blog, stuff like that. Man, you're right, but I got a valid excuse. I'm gonna tell you the valid excuse right now, real quick. I started working this week. Started back in my old job as of Tuesday. I started Tuesday, full time, overtime, whatever. By Saturday, I'll have 50 hours in. Starting next week on Monday, all the way through by Saturday, I'll have 61 hours or more. No less, possibly more. So you guys should be understanding about that. I'm working my ass off. But anyway, I'm going to keep the blogs up the best I can. Even if I got to, jump, dive in and make it quick, I'm going to try to do the best I can to, keep the same feel going, because I still like doing them. I still enjoy doing them and everything, so it's going to keep going. It's not going to stop. But anyway, Bader, Jardine fight. It's a good fight. And Joe Stevenson and George Sideropoulos. Now, man, I kind of had Stevenson for this fight. I thought, Stevenson's looked really impressive in his last 2-3 fights, you know what I mean? Did a really good job against Nate Diaz. Then he took on George Sideropoulos. Man, Sideropoulos ain't no joke, man. I don't know who he's training with now. That to me was fight of the night. At least performance of the night. Hell, for a waking of the night. Because, man, that guy really turned some heads that night and let everybody in that division know, hey, I'm here. I just took out a guy that's at a turning point in his career. I mean, Joe Stevenson, in my opinion, is looking really, really good these days. And then he runs into Sideropoulos, and just Sideropoulos completely rolls with him. Rolls with him and defends everything he does. Pretty much has the upper hand through most of the fight. I didn't think that was going to happen that way. Win for Sideropoulos. It was a good fight, man. Good fight. Moving on to Vanderlei Silva versus Michael Bisping. Vanderlei Silva was on point that night. And looking good. And looking a lot more like the past. You know what I mean? Vanderlei scored the win, obviously. And it went fairly... It was a good fight. But it went fairly... it went his way pretty much the entire time. Like I said, it was a good fight. Semi-close fight. Bisping, I don't really think was all that impressive. I've never really thought Bisping was all that impressive. I think he got a lot of close calls. And I think the calls, the close calls, some of them kind of lean in his direction because he's the, you know, poster boy for British fighters, which I think there could be plenty of new poster boys right now because he ain't that good. He had a couple of questionable moments in that fight where he could have very well been knocked out. Vanderlei Silva looks great, and I had a feeling that, you know, okay, he went back and trained with his old trainer. I don't remember his first name, but his last name's Noguiera. He trained with him back in the day, Pride days. You know, the days when he's really very aggressive days. You know what I mean? You know them days. Any Pride fan knows those days, and those days are back. I just think he was a little bit. He had just a small percentage of being gun shy. You know, on stuff like on his old style like that, because he doesn't want to leave himself open while he's coming in crazy. You know, and it was classic Vanderlei Silva. Totally. You know, came in both hands swinging, went to town, caught Bisping with a nasty punch. Bisping hit the deck, caught him with a few more shots, and then the round was over. I think that at that point it was the second round. I think, like I said, I haven't watched a whole lot of MMA since that night, and I had a buzz on that night. So, but anyway, we're going to move on to Cain Velasquez versus Big Nog. You guys know how I had that fight. I had the Big Nog winning that fight. You know, I don't want to say fairly easily, but I had Big Nog giving Cain his first loss. You know, and hats off, man. Hats off to Cain Velasquez, totally. To me, he's proven that, and probably to a lot of you as well, I've never been real enthusiastic about Cain's punching power, you know. I think that if he had real, you know, top of the division punching power, but he would have taken Ben Rothwell out in a much more devastating fashion. He would have taken Chet Congo out in a much more devastating fashion because he beat on him for 2 rounds, 2 solid rounds. But you know what? I was looking at some interviews, doing some some research or whatever. A lot of people said he's working on his stand-up, working on his boxing, he's working on his punching technique. Well, it showed up. It showed up that night, big time. And like I said, man, hats off to the guy because he did the right training, winning with a guy that can take a beating, and he beat his ass. You know, a lot of people might say, well, UFC, stops us too early. You know what? I don't know, man. I think in any organization, the way he was landing 3-4 blows while Noguiera was on the floor. I don't see how it could have went any other way in any other organization or anything. I think it would have went that way. Period. Big Nog will be back. You know, a lot of he even said in some of his interviews that a lot of people say, oh, I'm getting too old. I'm going to prove that I'm not too old. The guy's only like 30. What is he? 33? He can't be too old. I mean, me personally, I think he looks 40. You know. That being said, it's like he's also done some awesome wars. But he did an awesome war with Randy Couture, which, in my opinion, I think Randy Couture's done, man. You know, and I'm not dissing the guy. The guy's had years in the business. You know what I mean? Randy Couture started with the UFC when he was like mid-30s. Randy Couture's basically got like 15 years in the business, basically. You know, give or take. I think he's to the point and to the age where he's done. Awesome win for Cain Velasquez, man. Awesome win. And I'm not sure I'm on board just yet. I think he'll be good against Frank Mir. He may be able to test Frank Mir's chin. I think Frank Mir's got a pretty good chin, but we've seen it tested. You know, nobody really knows what kind of chin Brock has. You know, and that's the 2 guys right now that are in his way from a title shot. I think the Frank Mir, the Shane Carwin fight, whoever wins that fight is going to take on Cain Velasquez. I think they're going to set it up that way. Maybe not. You know what I mean? Because what they're saying now is they weren't talking about it much. But what they're saying now is it's a Shane Carwin versus Frank Mir for interim title. So does that mean Brock's not ready? No, I think it's a publicity move. I think it's something to, oh my gosh, it's gonna be unification of the titles. It's gonna be all crazy. It's gonna, I think it's just something to build more because Brock's coming back. He's already said it himself. There doesn't need to be any kind of interim title, but it's going on. So Frank Mir versus Shane Carwin for the interim title. Cain Velasquez, Brock, Frank Mir, and Shane Carwin. We're going to see what's going to pan out with those 4 because those seem to be the 4 top heavyweights, basically. Way back when, I was excited to see Shane Carwin and Cain Velasquez. But that fight got called off, which I think it was a plan. So, okay, let's branch off here. We got a Cain Velasquez match and we got a Shane Carwin match. We can make two separate stories out of it, basically. Branch off and make a Y out of it rather than having to go one way and make less money. They're out to make a lot of money. It is exciting, man. It is what it is, and they do a good job in it. They got to do what they have to do about making money and put on good fights, and they've done that. Too bad the Noguiera fight wasn't good, because it wasn't good. It made Noguiera look like he had a stinking staph infection again or some shit, but it just seems to me like it seemed like Noguiera barely showed up. Or he barely had a chance to show up, really. I mean, Cain Velasquez kicked ass that night. I'm going to close it up here. Went a lot longer than I thought it was gonna. So jump on the bandwagon with the rest of my homies. Thanks a lot for sticking around, man. Take care.